Remember those days when you step out and it's a hot summer and you think to yourself, wow, this heat is unbearable. Congratulations, you wouldn't last a day in the desert. But then there are these experts. Some of you might know them, but some of you won't. We're talking about the Jewish desert dwellers. These lovely people, on the other hand, have spent centuries and centuries thriving in some of the most unforgivable landscapes on Earth. And guess what? No modern plumbing or fancy grocery stores, just ingenuity, adaptation, and a pretty admirable adaptability to make nature work in their favor. So, how on earth did they do it? How is it that they do it so effortlessly when we can't go a second without having a draft of air blow over us? They use their brains, and not that we don't have them, they've just been using it a wee bit more. Through a mix of clever water collection methods, sustainable farming techniques, and of course a strong sense of community. Unlike city dwellers who panic when the Wi-Fi is down, these desert communities have spent years and years battling and figuring it out how to extract life from the driest places imaginable. And it's a good thing we're here to break it down for you. Let's begin with the art of well water collection. Try to form a mental image of this. You're in the middle of the desert, surrounded by nothing but sand dunes, and you need water. What do? If you're a Jewish desert dweller from centuries past, you'd start digging. Yes, a lot. It's as simple as that. Deep wells have long been a lifeline, tapping into underground aquifers hidden beneath the sand. Some wells stretch hundreds of feet deep, which, in case you're wondering, means an insane amount of manual labor. And forget modern drilling machines, these wells were often dug with primitive tools and sometimes even bare hands, and of course, sheer willpower. When was the last time you dug a tunnel with your hands? Let me guess. Ages ago? While playing at the beach? Yeah, that doesn't count. Once the well was ready, water was drawn using simple but effective pulley systems, leather buckets, and when available, animals like camel or donkeys to make the job slightly less backbreaking. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. One thing about the Jewish desert dwellers is that they made every drop of water count. Since rainwater in the desert is as rare as an honest politician, Jewish desert communities had no other ways but to totally master the art of collecting and storing every possible drop that they could find. They designed homes and structures with sloped rooftops that funneled rainwater into underground cisterns or stone basins. It's amazing how clever human beings can be. If ancient desert engineers could trap water in a drought, you can definitely trap this channel in your feed and hit like and subscribe. Yeah. They even made the best use of storms. A single storm could provide enough water to last for months together, if stored properly, that is. Cisterns were built deep underground to keep water cool and prevent the water from evaporating away. The collected rainwater was then used for drinking, cooking, or even irrigation. To put it simply, these communities had a zero-waste water policy long before sustainability became a trending buzzword. And yeah, you know, the natural springs that we just love to bathe in, right? The Jews treated it as a nature's underground faucet and made the best use of it too. If you're lucky enough to stumble upon a natural spring in the desert, you've basically won the survival lottery. Jewish communities knew exactly where to find these springs, often using them as central gathering points for villages. How did they make this clean enough for use? Well, these water sources were naturally filtered through layers of rock and sand, making them clean and mineral-rich. They were so valuable that entire trade routes and settlements were built around them. No bottled water? No problem, just head to the nearest spring and fill up your fancy clay jug because that's how it works in the desert. Community ponds were also a collective water strategy for the desert dwellers. Since survival in the desert is not a solo mission, with the help of a lot of group effort, Jewish communities built and maintained these massive communal ponds to store water and runoff. These weren't just little shallow puddles, they were carefully constructed reservoirs and provided a steady water supply for a whole number of families and livestock. And yes, let's not leave the plants out of this because the crops too were fed in this way. And that's not even the best part. The ponds doubled as social hubs where people gathered, exchanged stories, and because humor is a survival tool probably, made jokes about whose turn it was to clean out the sand. It was like the ancient version of a cafeteria, only one where you get to bathe in. You literally gotta give it to the desert dwellers for filtering water without the help of a single fancy gadget. If you think ancient desert dwellers were drinking murky sand-filled waters, well, think again, because they never did. They came up with these natural filtration systems using sand, charcoal, and sunlight to purify their water. These sand filters trap debris and larger particles, working like nature's Brita filter. Charcoal filters, on the other hand, were used to absorb impurities and improve taste, because no one wants their water to taste like camel sweat now, do they? Sunlight purification is probably something a lot of us aren't that familiar with, but if all you have to do is let water sit in the sun and kill bacteria and viruses naturally, why not? The thing that was so great about these methods was that they were so simple, effective, and unlike today's overpriced water filters, free of cost. Now I know working your backs off farming in the desert isn't something any of us would want to do. But guess what else isn't fun? Starvation. Now that we've covered water a bit, let's talk about food. Because let's be honest here, surviving on just water is a great way to turn into a very hydrated skeleton. We're not fish, at least no one's identifying as them yet. Jewish desert dwellers knew that they had to keep their families fed, so they used smart agricultural techniques to grow crops. And this they did even when rain decided not to show up at times. Terrace farming was something very common back in those days. Hillsides were transformed into step-like terraces to prevent soil erosion and maximize water retention. Underground irrigation systems were made of clay pipes or small underground canals that directed water straight to plant roots, minimizing evaporation. Drought-resistant crops were grown instead of growing water-guzzling plants. They cultivated dates, figs, barley, and olive crops that thrived with the least amount of moisture to be spent. These farming strategies made sure food was always available even in the driest months. So if things did not happen to be convenient on a Tuesday and the desert was dry as it could be, the Jewish desert dwellers would make it convenient. Now, eating off the land might sound a little savage, but then again, a lot of these tactics were based on survival and not a trendy diet before foraging became a hipster hobby. Desert dwellers were doing it out of necessity. They'd had to do it so they'd get it done no matter how unbearable the conditions were. They learned which wild plants were edible, medicinal, or just a really bad idea to eat before they put off any of those things into their stomachs. But then again, they probably had to learn the hard way themselves. However, they found that acacia seeds could be ground into flour for baking. And who knew desert herbs could be used to add so much flavor to food and even medicinal purposes? Our desert dweller buddies, they even found that edible roots and cacti provided hydration and nutrients when food was scarce. That being said, you don't get to go nuts on a pricky cactus. Thorns off first, guys. And if plant-based meals were enough, which for a lot of us obviously isn't, they also raised goats, sheep, and camels for milk, meat, and wool. They're the perfect example of everything was used, nothing was wasted. They really knew how to work with nature instead of fighting against it. They're the perfect examples of coexistence. Maybe they're steps ahead of us when it comes to understanding that perhaps the greatest survival strategy was the ability to adapt to the environment instead of trying to change it. Instead of wasting energy fighting the desert's harsh conditions, Jewish desert communities worked with what they had, and even though what they had probably wasn't what we would consider a lot, they still made it the best way that they could. They built homes from mud bricks and stone, keeping interiors cool during the day and warm at night. Their nomadic lifestyles helped them move to better water sources when needed. Trade networks ensured that food and supplies were always accessible, completely different from the modern civilizations that rely on overcomplicated technology. These desert dwellers used common sense, resourcefulness, and community collaboration to make life not just bearable, but also sustainable. What are our final thoughts on this? While today's world is obsessed with high-tech solutions, Jewish desert dwellers remind us that survival isn't about having the latest gadgets. It's about understanding what nature truly is and using it wisely. Their water conservation methods, sustainable farming practices, and a deep-rooted sense of community ensured their survival for generations. So, the next time you complain about running out of bottled water, hey, just remember, centuries ago, people were digging 200-foot wells by hand, filtering water with sand and growing food in a place where nothing could survive. Perspective changes everything. Like and share, because surviving in the desert is one thing, but doing it without electricity in today's world, that's an entirely different level of devotion. Wait till you see how Orthodox Jews have embraced that challenge. Subscribe for more untold stories.